Tim Scott's real estate empire is a speck compared to Donald Trump's. Given where the South Carolina senator started, that's still pretty impressive. Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is my colleague, Forbes reporter Kyle Mullins. Kyle, thanks so much for joining me.
Great to join you, Brittany.
Forbes is tracking all of the net worths of all of the 2024 presidential hopefuls. You're looking into Tim Scott, who's the senator of South Carolina. How much is he worth?
Tim Scott's worth just over $1 million, which is pretty remarkable for a guy who grew up in poverty in Charleston, South Carolina. We're valuing him as officially a millionaire.
So some people in this race are from political dynasties like the Kennedys. Other people have made their fortunes in real estate like former President Donald Trump. Can you talk a little bit about Tim Scott's background? You did mention he grew up in poverty. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. So Senator Tim Scott grew up just outside of Charleston, South Carolina. He was born to raised by a single mom. Like I mentioned before, grew up in relative poverty there. He, showed an interest in politics from an early age, but he didn't actually get into politics until later in life. He was in, his student government in high school, according to his memoir. But he, what he ended up doing was after he went to college, he was a salesman, and he got into the insurance selling business. So started selling vacuums in college, and then moved on to men's clothing, and then eventually up to insurance, so kind of moving up the value chain there. And he opened his own Allstate branch, selling life insurance, home insurance, that kind of thing, in 1999, and that's where he really started to make his money. And so that's kind of his early life background. His Allstate branch took off. He credits that to a policy he had of offering a quote within an hour of anyone reaching out. That was how he says he makes his money.
So you just explained Tim Scott, the businessman, but can you now give us a little preview of who Tim Scott, the politician, is for maybe some of our viewers who aren't as familiar?
Absolutely. So he first got started in sort of elected politics in the 1990s. He was elected to the Charleston County Council. And it was actually pretty remarkable at the time because he was the first Black Republican to be elected to any office in South Carolina since the Reconstruction era. So really, he's kind of a marker of progress in that regard. And after that, he was on the county council for a very long time, doing his business career, started to invest in some real estate. He ran for the state house in, I want to say 2009. 2 years later, ran for the House of Representatives, won a seat there. And then in 2013, then Governor Nikki Haley, who he's now running against for president, she appointed him to an open seat in the U.S. Senate. So in just 4 years, 2009, 2013, he went from county council to the U.S. Senate. And it was a pretty meteoric rise for him.
That's definitely just an incredible rise for any politician. And as you mentioned, Nikki Haley, who was the governor of South Carolina, he's now running against for president. Can you explain how Tim Scott is different than any of the other contenders in this kind of crowded field?
Absolutely. It is a crowded field. And I think, keeping track of all the candidates on the debate stage on Wednesday is going to be a chore for anyone who's watching. And that's without the guy who's polling at 60%, who said he's not going to attend. Tim Scott cuts a really interesting figure in the Republican Party at large. I think I mentioned that he was the first Black Republican elected to any office in South Carolina since Reconstruction. He's also the only Black Republican in the U.S. Senate right now. And so again, he kind of cuts an interesting figure there. He's been talked about in the Republican Party as a rising star and as someone who, if the Republican Party wanted to pursue a more racially diverse electoral coalition, this might be somebody they would nominate. And so I think I think he's a reliably conservative vote. He's not kind of a moderate of any sense. He's very religious, quite socially conservative. And so and policy-wise, I wouldn't say that he's all that different from most of the other folks in the field. But I think it's what he represents as a Black man in the Republican Party that I think sets him apart from the field in some way.
And to me, too, his campaign is really striking a more optimistic chord than a lot of the other hopefuls. But I do now want to talk a little bit more about his net worth. Forbes is valuing him at over $1 million. What makes up the bulk of his fortune?
Absolutely. So first, I just want to say you're absolutely right. That's the other key thing is he's really pushing an optimistic message, and that's really based on, I think, his life story. He sees himself as an example of the American dream. Come to life. Grew up in poverty, is now a millionaire. And so let's talk about his net worth a little bit. Most of it is his real estate empire. So he's got, his personal residence, which most people, that's the majority of their net worth anyway. He's got his personal residence in Hanahan, South Carolina, and he's got an apartment that he shares with an aide in DC. He owns both of those. And then he's also got 3 rental properties in South Carolina. And they've got varying levels of debt on them. His personal residence also has some debt on it. But overall, that's about 60% of his net worth. And then the remainder, about 60%. And then the remainder is he's got his federal pension, which is only going to get more valuable the longer he's in office. Whether he's president, whether he continues to be a senator, that pension's just going to keep getting more valuable. And then the last bit is he's got, we're estimating about 15-20% of his net worth is in just like stock holdings and stuff like that, which actually only really shows up in his net worth in the past year or so. He bought that all. It seems like he bought it all with income from his latest book, his 2022 memoir. So he made a lot of money off of that, plowed it into stocks.
It sounds like a lot of these 2024 hopefuls wrote recent books, and then that's kind of, like you first write the book and then you get on the campaign trail. And according to recent polling, Tim Scott is in the middle of the pack when it comes to these other GOP presidential contenders. But how does his net worth stack up to all the other hopefuls?
Sure. Yeah, I think he's probably on the lower end of the spectrum. Most of these folks have at least a little bit more money, either because they had a larger and longer business career, or they've been in politics longer, one way or the other, or they inherited money from their family. So there are at least 2 billionaires in the field, right? You've got Donald Trump, and then you've also got Vivek Ramaswamy, who I think we just valued as a billionaire as of today. And then you've got a number of other folks who we're valuing at sort of higher million numbers. So they're all multimillionaires. I say Tim Scott is probably closer to someone like Asa Hutchinson, who's the other candidate that I've covered here. We valued him at about $1.5 million, and most of that was his house. It's the same thing. I think the other thing to note, honestly, is Tim Scott's a younger candidate than a lot of the folks who are running. Not all of them, but than at least a fair amount. And so he's had less time, frankly, to build up a big net worth portfolio.
Kyle Mullins, I appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining me.
Happy to talk to you, Brittany, anytime.